Imagine a woman who isn't trying to impress anyone, not dressing for the male gaze, not posting for validation, not softening her edges to fit into someone else's idea of feminine. She sits in her own silence like it's a throne, listens to her intuition like it's gospel, speaks her truth like it's the only language she knows. She doesn't need attention, doesn't crave approval, doesn't even need to be understood. And that, right there, is what makes her dangerous. Because she has nothing to prove, nothing to lose, nothing to apologize for. And a woman with nothing to prove is absolutely, terrifyingly free. But here's what nobody tells you about this freedom. It didn't come from rejecting the world. It came from something far more radical. It came from rejecting the lie that she needed the world's permission to exist. We live in a civilization built on the controlled hunger of women. Not physical hunger, though that too, but psychological hunger, emotional hunger, spiritual hunger, the hunger to be chosen, to be desired, to be seen as worthy, to matter. From the moment she takes her first breath, she's taught that her value lies not in who she is, but in how much she's needed by others, how pleasing she can be, how small she can make herself, how seamlessly she can disappear into the background of other people's stories. The script writes itself before she can even speak. Smile more, speak less, take up less space, be grateful for attention, apologize for your very existence, be sweet, be accommodating, be everything to everyone and nothing to yourself. But what happens when a woman stops needing to be needed? What happens when she breaks the script that was written for her before she was born? When she no longer dims her light to make others comfortable, when she stops chasing love and starts embodying it, when she stops performing femininity and starts living it from the inside out. Carl Jung called this individuation, the painful, sacred, revolutionary journey back to the authentic self, the terrifying process of becoming who you actually are, not who you were programmed to be. And when a woman begins that journey, something shifts in the collective unconscious. She doesn't become louder, she becomes clearer. She doesn't fight harder, she stops fighting altogether. She doesn't beg anymore, she remembers who she is. And that remembering, that's where the real danger begins. Because a woman who remembers her true nature is ungovernable. Society doesn't just benefit from women who need, it's economically dependent on it. Think about it for a moment. Really think about it. The global economy would collapse overnight if women suddenly felt complete exactly as they are. The beauty industry thrives on her insecurity about her face, her body, her age. The fashion industry profits from her belief that she needs to buy an identity. The wellness industry feeds on her conviction that she's fundamentally broken and needs fixing. The diet industry, the self-help industry, the plastic surgery industry, all of it depends on one core belief, that she is not enough as she is. She's told to chase femininity like it's a product she can purchase, to outsource her self-worth to mirrors and metrics and messages that vanish as quickly as they arrive. Even her natural instincts are weaponized against her. Her empathy becomes a tool for manipulation. Her nurturing nature becomes a reason to neglect herself. Her desire for connection becomes a chain that binds her to everyone else's needs above her own. She's praised when she stays quiet about injustice, celebrated when she makes herself smaller to accommodate others' egos, loved when she surrenders her dreams for someone else's comfort, shamed when she dares to choose herself. Pause here and take a breath. Feel what's stirring in your chest. Is this what you've been carrying all along? This invisible weight of never being enough? Let me tell you about Sarah, because her story might sound familiar. Sarah spent 34 years being a masterpiece of feminine conditioning. The perfect daughter who never caused waves. The girlfriend who never asked for too much attention, too much time, too much love. The employee who never said no, never set boundaries, never demanded her worth. She wore her chronic exhaustion like a badge of honor, believing that burnout was proof of her value to the world. That if she could just be more helpful, more available, more understanding, more selfless, then maybe, finally, she would be worthy of love. She had learned to read rooms like ancient texts, adjusting her personality like a thermostat to maintain everyone else's comfort. She spoke in questions instead of statements. Don't you think maybe we could possibly consider? Instead of I believe this. She apologized for taking up space, for having opinions, for existing at full volume. Her days were spent in constant performance. The performance of being effortlessly beautiful, endlessly patient, mysteriously fulfilled by giving everyone else what they needed while never acknowledging what she needed herself. But performances, even masterful ones, eventually exhaust the performer. One Tuesday morning, something cracked in the foundation of her carefully constructed life. She was standing in her kitchen, phone buzzing incessantly with another request, another demand for her time, her energy, her emotional labor. Her calendar was already overflowing. Her tank was already empty. Her soul was already screaming. And instead of reaching for the phone like she had every day for decades, she just stopped. She let it buzz, let it demand, let it go unanswered. For the first time in her adult life, she asked herself a question that terrified her. What do I actually want? The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was devastating, because she realized, with the sharp clarity of a blade, that she didn't know. She had been so busy being what others needed that she had forgotten what she needed. So busy performing femininity that she had lost touch with her feminine essence. That's when the performance started to crack. The constant smiling made her face hurt. The endless accommodation made her soul rebel. The perpetual shrinking made her spirit rage. She stopped saying yes when she meant no. Stopped laughing at jokes that weren't funny. Stopped pretending to agree when she disagreed. Stopped contorting her truth to fit other people's comfort zones. And as she stopped performing, she began to feel something she hadn't felt in years: alive. But feeling alive, she discovered, is not always comfortable. Because aliveness includes everything. Not just the pretty emotions, but the messy ones too. Not just the socially acceptable parts of her psyche, but the wild, untamed, inconvenient parts as well. The parts that Jung called the shadow. She turns inward, away from the noise and demands of the external world. And there, in the depths of her own psyche, in the basement of her consciousness that she had locked away years ago, she meets the shadow. All the parts of herself she was taught to exile, to reject, to be ashamed of. Her righteous anger that burns like a sacred fire. Her untamed wildness that refuses to be domesticated. Her fierce boundaries that say no with the authority of someone who finally values her own well-being. Her unapologetic ambition that reaches for what she deserves. Her full sexual agency that belongs to her and her alone. Her deep, primal, ancient knowing that needs no external validation. Carl Jung understood something that most psychologists of his time completely missed, something that even today, many people struggle to accept. The shadow is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. He said, "The shadow is everything you refuse to be, but are." And for the awakening woman, for the woman who is beginning to remember herself, that shadow is not just sacred, it's absolutely essential for her survival and her thriving. Let me explain what Jung meant by the shadow, because this isn't about becoming destructive or cruel or heartless. The shadow is simply the vast repository of all the aspects of ourselves that we've disowned, repressed, denied, or rejected, often because society, family, religion, or culture taught us that these parts were unacceptable, especially in women. For women specifically, the shadow typically contains the fierce protector who was told she was too aggressive when she stood up for herself or others. The visionary leader who was told she was too ambitious when she reached for power or influence. The truth teller who was told she was too intense when she spoke difficult realities. The boundary setter who was told she was too selfish when she prioritized her own needs. The sexual being who was told she was too much when she owned her desire. The wild woman who was told she was too untamed when she couldn't be controlled. The angry woman who was told she was too emotional when she expressed justified rage. The powerful woman who was told she was too threatening when she stopped making herself small. But here's what most people don't understand about shadow work. What makes it both terrifying and absolutely liberating. The shadow doesn't just contain our rejected pain, our denied rage, our suppressed grief. It contains our rejected power. What parts of yourself have you hidden away, locked in the basement of your psyche, because you were told they made you difficult or too much or unladylike? Write them down without censoring. Don't judge them. Welcome them home like long-lost parts of your soul. Sarah's first real encounter with her shadow happened during what she later called the Tuesday morning rebellion. As she let that phone buzz unanswered for the first time in decades, as she chose her own peace over someone else's demands, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Pure, undiluted, righteous rage. Not the explosive, destructive kind of rage that breaks dishes and slams doors, but the slow-burning, purposeful, sacred rage of a woman who suddenly realizes how many years she's spent betraying herself. How many times she said yes when every cell in her body was screaming no. How many dreams she's buried alive to keep other people comfortable. How many times she smiled when she wanted to scream, laughed when she wanted to cry, stayed when she wanted to leave. This rage terrified her at first. She'd been taught from birth that angry women were ugly, unlovable, dangerous to society. That feminine anger was somehow more threatening than masculine anger, more unacceptable, more shameful, more proof of mental instability. But as she sat with this rage, instead of running from it, instead of numbing it with shopping or wine or busy work, something extraordinary happened. She realized it wasn't trying to destroy anything beautiful or good. It was trying to protect something precious, her authentic self, her integrity, her right to exist as she actually was. The rage was her psyche's guardian angel, saying with fierce love, "This is not okay. You deserve so much better than this. You deserve to be seen, truly seen. You deserve to be heard, really heard. You deserve to be honored for who you are, not who you pretend to be. You deserve to take up space. You deserve to matter. You deserve to be the protagonist of your own life." This is what Jung called shadow integration. Not destroying the uncomfortable parts of ourselves, not getting rid of our anger or our wildness or our inconvenient truths, but learning to dance with them, to understand their gifts, to honor their medicine, to recognize them as essential parts of our wholeness. Sarah began to understand that her anger wasn't a character flaw that needed fixing. It was her inner compass pointing directly toward her violated boundaries. Her selfishness wasn't a moral failing that required repentance. It was her soul's cry for basic self-preservation. Her intensity wasn't too much for the world to handle. It was exactly the right amount for her authentic life. She learned to access her anger without becoming consumed by it, to set boundaries without building impenetrable walls, to love herself without abandoning others, to be fierce without being cruel, to be soft without being weak, to be powerful without being destructive. Jung wrote about this process with deep reverence. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But he also knew intimately that becoming authentic, becoming whole, requires facing the parts of ourselves that we've been taught are unacceptable. If this part is hitting something deep in you right now, if you're feeling that familiar stirring of recognition, that, oh my God, this is my story, feeling, keep going. The next few minutes might feel like looking into the most honest mirror you've ever encountered. But this time, you'll see your whole face, not just the parts you've been allowed to show the world. The integration process isn't comfortable or convenient. Sarah found herself feeling emotions she'd successfully numbed for decades. She started saying things she kept locked in her throat for years. She began making choices that prioritized her own well-being over other people's comfort. And let me tell you, not everyone was thrilled about this development. Some people in her life loved this new version of Sarah. The ones who had been waiting for her to show up fully all along, who had been longing to meet the real woman behind the performance. But others were deeply disturbed by her transformation. They preferred the accommodating, predictable, manageable version. They liked her better when she was smaller, more focused on their needs than her own, easier to control and manipulate. This is what Jung called the transcendent function, the psychological process by which opposing forces within us are reconciled and integrated into a greater wholeness. It's not about choosing between being kind or being strong, gentle or fierce, giving or receiving. It's about discovering that you can be both simultaneously without contradiction, without splitting yourself in half. The woman who has truly integrated her shadow doesn't swing between extremes like a pendulum in the wind. She operates from her center like a gyroscope, stable, grounded, unshakable no matter what storms rage around her. She's neither doormat nor tyrant. She's sovereign over her own life. She knows when to yield like water and when to stand firm like a mountain, when to give generously and when to receive gracefully, when to speak truth and when to listen deeply, when to fight for what matters and when to flow with what is. Most importantly, she knows that her worth, her value, her right to exist and thrive is not determined by others' comfort with her wholeness. But integration is not a destination you arrive at and then you're done. It's a daily practice, a conscious choice you make again and again. Every single day, Sarah had to choose herself again. Every day, she had to remember that she was worthy of her own attention, her own care, her own fierce love and protection. And something miraculous began to happen. As she stopped abandoning herself in difficult moments, she became more genuinely present for others. As she stopped performing love and started embodying it, she became magnetic in ways she never expected. As she stopped desperately seeking validation and started validating herself, she became a source of validation for others. This is the beautiful paradox that Jung understood deeply. When we stop needing so much from others, we have infinitely more to give from a place of authentic abundance rather than desperate lack. Now, she doesn't fear solitude. She craves it like oxygen, because she no longer abandons herself in the silence. She's learned that being alone and being lonely are completely different experiences. She doesn't dress to be desired by others. She dresses to feel powerful in her own skin. She doesn't soften her truth to make it digestible. She speaks with the full authority of her experience. She's not cold. She's clear. She's not selfish. She's self-possessed. She's not heartless. She's wholehearted. She's not dangerous because she wants to dominate others. She's dangerous because she refuses to be dominated. And that absolutely terrifies a world that was built on her compliance. Jung wrote extensively about this phase of development, which he called the emergence of the self, not the ego-driven self that seeks external validation, but the authentic self that exists independent of others' opinions. This woman has learned what Jung called the art of letting things happen. She doesn't force outcomes through manipulation or control. She doesn't exhaust herself trying to manage other people's emotions. She doesn't twist herself into pretzels to fit into spaces that weren't designed for her. Instead, she trusts her inner guidance and acts from that place of deep knowing. Sarah's transformation wasn't dramatic or sudden. There was no lightning bolt moment of enlightenment, no grand revelation that changed everything overnight. Instead, it was a series of small, courageous choices. The choice to say no to dinner plans when her body was tired, even though saying no felt selfish. The choice to speak up in meetings when she had something valuable to contribute, even though being visible felt scary. The choice to end conversations that drained her energy, even though leaving felt rude. She started wearing clothes that made her feel powerful instead of pretty. Deep jewel tones instead of pastels. Structured blazers instead of flowy tops. Red lipstick because she loved how it looked, not because it was attractive to others. She stopped apologizing for taking up space, literally and figuratively. She sat with her legs uncrossed in meetings. She walked with her shoulders back and her head high. She spoke at her natural volume instead of constantly modulating her voice to be less threatening. She began trusting her intuition over others' expertise. If something felt wrong in her body, she honored that feeling even when everyone else thought it was fine. If someone's energy felt off, she created distance even when they seemed perfectly nice. And the strangest thing happened. As she became more authentically herself, her relationships transformed. Some people left, and their departure felt like a relief rather than a loss. The energy vampires, the narcissists, the people who had only valued her for what she could give them. Good riddance. But the people who stayed, their love deepened. They appreciated her honesty, her directness, her refusal to play games. They found her more interesting, more magnetic, more alive. She realized she hadn't lost anything real. She'd only lost the illusion that she needed to be someone else to be loved. New people entered her life too. People who were attracted to her authenticity rather than her performance. People who wanted to know the real Sarah, not the carefully curated version she'd been presenting to the world. This is what Jung meant by individuation, the process of becoming undivided, not fragmented between who you are and who you think you should be, but integrated, whole, authentically yourself. The woman who has completed this journey doesn't need to announce her power. It emanates from her like a quiet frequency that others can feel even if they can't name it. She doesn't compete with other women because she understands that there's no scarcity of worthiness. There's enough love, enough success, enough happiness for everyone. Another woman's shine doesn't dim her own light. She doesn't people please because she knows that trying to be liked by everyone is a guaranteed way to be respected by no one, including herself. She loves more deeply because she's no longer loving from a place of need, but from a place of abundance. She gives because she wants to, not because she has to. She receives because she's worthy, not because she's earned it. This woman has become what Jung called a container for herself, someone who can hold her own complexity, her own contradictions, her own full humanity without needing others to make sense of her. She can be strong and vulnerable, fierce and gentle, independent and connected, all at the same time. She doesn't need to choose one aspect of her personality over another because she's learned to integrate all parts of herself into a coherent whole. And this integration makes her unshakable, not because nothing can hurt her, but because she knows she can survive anything. She's been to the depths of her own shadow and emerged not just intact, but transformed. You'll know her when she enters a room, not because she's the loudest or the most dramatic, but because she's the most grounded, the most present, the most real. She doesn't seek the spotlight, but light gravitates toward her anyway. She doesn't demand attention, but somehow becomes the center of meaningful conversations. She doesn't try to dominate, but her opinions carry weight because they come from depth, not surface-level thinking. She doesn't beg to be loved. She is love, incarnate and walking among us. She doesn't compete, she creates. She doesn't compare, she celebrates. She doesn't diminish, she illuminates. And when other women see her, something ancient stirs in their DNA. A cellular memory buried beneath generations of conditioning. The remembrance that they, too, can return to themselves. That they don't have to perform to belong. That they don't have to shrink to be loved. That they don't have to need in order to matter. This is the ripple effect Jung wrote about. When one person completes their individuation process, it creates a morphic field of possibility for others to do the same. The woman who needs nothing becomes a living permission slip for other women's authenticity. She doesn't preach or teach or try to save anyone. She simply exists as proof that another way is possible. She shows them through her presence that you can be soft without being weak, strong without being harsh, independent without being isolated, loving without being needy, powerful without being cruel. What would change in your life if you stopped trying to be liked and started being yourself? What would you do? How would you speak? What would you wear? Who would you become? Sarah's story continues, but from a completely different foundation now. She still faces challenges. Life hasn't become perfect just because she's become whole. She still experiences doubt, fear, uncertainty. The difference is that she no longer abandons herself in those difficult moments. When anxiety arises, she doesn't judge it as weakness. She receives it as information. When sadness comes, she doesn't rush to fix it. she allows it to move through her. When anger surfaces, she doesn't suppress it. She listens to its wisdom. She's learned to be her own best friend, her own wise counselor, her own fierce advocate. Not because she doesn't value others' perspectives, but because she trusts her own judgment first. She's become what Jung called a friend to herself, someone who treats her own needs, feelings, and dreams with the same respect she would show a beloved friend. She no longer looks to others to complete her, validate her, or give her life meaning. She's complete unto herself. This doesn't make her cold or disconnected. Quite the opposite. Because she doesn't need others to fill her emptiness. She can love them more freely, more purely, more generously. She's learned that needing nothing doesn't mean feeling nothing. It means that her feelings come from within rather than being dependent on external circumstances. When someone compliments her, she receives it gracefully, but doesn't need it to feel good about herself. When someone criticizes her, she considers it thoughtfully, but doesn't let it destroy her self-worth. She's developed what Jung called psychological immunity, the ability to remain centered in herself regardless of what's happening around her. So if you're listening to this and you feel that familiar stirring of recognition, if something in Sarah's story feels like your own story waiting to be written, you're not broken. You're not crazy. You're not asking for too much. You're waking up. If this exploration of Jung's ideas about shadow integration and individuation resonated with you, if you're ready to begin your own journey of becoming whole, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What part of your shadow is ready to be integrated? What aspect of yourself have you been hiding that's calling to be seen? And if you found value in diving deep into the psychology of authentic transformation, consider subscribing. We'll continue exploring what it means to become who you actually are, not who you were conditioned to be. But here's the most important thing I want you to understand. You don't need to wait for permission to begin this journey. You don't need to wait until you're ready, because no one is ever fully ready for transformation. You don't need to wait until it's convenient, because authenticity is never convenient. You can start today, right now, in this moment. Start by asking yourself, what am I pretending not to know about myself? Start by honoring one feeling you've been dismissing. Start by setting one boundary you've been afraid to set. Start by speaking one truth you've been afraid to voice. The woman who needs nothing isn't some far-off ideal you have to strive to become. She's already within you, waiting beneath all the conditioning, all the performance, all the trying. She's been there all along, patient and eternal, watching you exhaust yourself in pursuit of things that were never meant to complete you. She's the part of you that knows your worth isn't negotiable, that your voice matters, that your dreams are valid, that your existence is not an apology, but a celebration. Stay quiet, not because you're hiding, but because you're listening to the wisdom within. Stay rooted, not because you're stuck, but because you know who you are. Stay free, not because you're running from something, but because you're running toward yourself. Because the world desperately needs women who remember their power, who trust their intuition, who choose themselves not out of selfishness, but out of service to their deepest truth. The woman who needs nothing isn't a threat to love. She's love's most authentic expression. She's not dangerous to healthy relationships. She's toxic to unhealthy ones. And you're already her. You've always been her. You just forgot for a while, caught up in a world that profits from your amnesia. But memory is returning. Wholeness is calling. Your authentic self is rising. Welcome home to yourself. Welcome to the quiet revolution of a woman who remembers who she is. Welcome to your own becoming. Take a moment now to sit with whatever this brought up for you. Jung believed that the goal of life is not to be happy. Happiness is fleeting, but to be whole. And wholeness includes all of you. The light and the shadow, the gentle and the fierce, the human and the divine. You're not broken. You never were. You're not too much. You never were. You're not enough. You never were. You are in the sacred process of remembering who you've always been beneath all the conditioning. And that remembering, that integration of all your parts into one authentic whole, that's the most dangerous thing a woman can do. Because a whole woman is an ungovernable woman. And an ungovernable woman changes everything.